Welcome to another video podcast, or just podcast with Branden and Rich of Two Guys Tech. Today, we are going to be talking about our favorite hypervisor, ESXi, and more in the VMware family.
You're kind of a fanboy of this one. This I thought was going to be a great episode to open with a hypervisor because, like, I'll play with some other hypervisors. I'll learn XCP&G. I'll learn KVM. I'll even do some libvirtd. And Rich is like, you're wrong. Just stop what you're doing. Go back to VMware. It's the only way forward.
I feel like this one of those "this is the way" things, like moments. But yeah, so I think you're right. We should have a full disclosure in the beginning of this, which is like, I am a VMware fanboy. I am VCP DCV5, which is actually, I don't think even valid anymore. I'm VMware certified. I still consider myself VMware certified.
Hey, I'm VCP DC7, and I think mine ran out.
Yeah, well, it's like every 2 years.
You have to do them every year. I think
you have to renew it.
You got to pay Pearson that sweet.
It's a money making deal. But anyway, point being is that professionally, VMware has been like my du jour, my VMware virtualization du jour.
Well, and for the longest time, they were it. They were the game.
Unless you were looking at Zen, right? You could be looking at Zen and Citrix and all that kind of stuff. And they were the two. At the time I first got into virtualization, you basically had two. You had Citrix and Zen, and you had VMware and ESX. I believe I got started during the ESX, not ESXi era. But so yeah, those were the two, and I just happened to be lucky enough to hitch my horse to the right one. And
for real though, I looked it up and I was like, VMware as of last year, October-ish, 84% of the market.
I'm not surprised.
With Microsoft Hyper-V at 11, which is way higher than it has any right to be, in my opinion.
Wow.
And then Citrix at 4. And then, you add the rest up, you get...
Yeah, and you take the let's just say the open source community and just go and wad it into a big snowball, and there's your 4%.
But they were forecasting actually that it would lose full market, not like control market share, but like it was going to go down to like 80 or whatnot.
That's a bummer.
Because of things like Red Hat getting more available. Hyper-Vs actually getting better, supporting VLANs. We won't talk about how long that took. And Proxmox and just general, the rest of the market is catching up.
Yeah, there's competition. And I actually, no matter what, even though I'm a big fan of VMware, I will say that I'm a bigger fan of, if you will, competition, because that's what makes everything better. It makes it cheaper for people like us and you, if you're into this kind of stuff, because the more competition, the more they have to like compromise on being like, I'm the 800-pound gorilla, you're going to pay 3 times as much as you need to, kind of stuff. So I like that for sure.
So let's talk about what is ESXi.
All right. Well, what is ESXi? Do you want to start with what is ESX? Because that was the predecessor.
Scure, if you know that. I've only been around for ESXi. I don't know what ESX.
Okay, so in the beginning, I feel like there should be like a one of those like scene changes where like in the beginning there was ESX from VMware, and it was a hypervisor that had a bespoke Linux operating system that was with it.
So before we go in, a hypervisor is a place to house your VMs.
I had to literally look up.
I was like, we probably should tell people what hypervisor is.
This is not going to be any more descriptive.
And then maybe go on to what type 1, type 2 are.
Well, yeah, I got this. So a hypervisor, this is not going to be any more descriptive, people, but a hypervisor is a type of computer software, firmware, or hardware that creates and runs virtual machines.
Thanks, Wikipedia.
Yeah, that's Wikipedia. Basically, what a hypervisor is it's an operating system that's whole job is only to run other computers, virtual computers. And a virtual computer is just a computer that thinks it's a real computer, but it's actually just software. Because in the end, everything is just software. We look at computers, like the computer at my desk or the laptop and the iPad that are in front of Branden and I, we look at them and go, those are computers. They have hardware, and there's like a one-to-one relationship between the operating system talking directly to the hardware and all that kind of stuff, and that's true. But in the end, operating systems are just software. And a hypervisor is a software that runs OSs as software. It's the same way your computer runs Word or Excel or Call of Duty.
And you can have two of them. There's a type 1, which is going to be your bare metal. It's what any enterprise is running and should run. I have a lot of questions if they're not. And it's just going to be an appliance. ESXi itself is 600 megs as of 8.0, which is wildly small. I remember 6.7 was like 300 something. And
I was going to say, it got fat.
Yeah, right?
But it didn't get super
It's all
fat,
those dang containers everywhere.
Yeah, you got to get your sweet containers. Everybody's gonna hop on that.
It's an appliance, and that's all it does. So like it maybe, and if I remember correctly, my VCP teacher proctor was very adamant that it was Unix-like. It was not Linux, and it's not. It doesn't use the Linux kernel. It uses a Unix kernel, but your commands are like 90.
It's a POSIX operating system. So, ls and cd and dir and ps-ef : niner and a walkie-talkie, all of those still work because it's a POSIX operating
So that's type 1. Type 2 is more like you're running a VM on an actual computer. So like Windows 11 can be a type 2 hypervisor.
Two VMs on Windows 11?
I don't. Are there artificial limits? I always thought there was.
No, there's artificial. I mean,
you can stack them until your computer dies. So.
Well, I guess what I mean is that, like, and I don't want to go on too much of a tangent, but I'm not talking about like if you get what is the VirtualBox, right? VirtualBox you can run as many as your hardware can handle before, like Branden says, catches fire. But I think there's native virtualization built into Windows 10 and the Windows 11.
It's Hyper-V.
It is Hyper-V, which is verboten to speak about. No, and but I think you're only allowed to run 2 concurrent.
Okay. Because
they don't want you to be running Hyper-V. They want you to buy Windows Server if you're going to run Hyper-V.
That's fair.
I digress. Anyway, continue.
But yeah, and so your Mac can run VirtualBox is a very popular one. Linux will do stuff in libvirt if you want to run it kernel. If I remember correctly, XCPNG is still a type 1, but Proxmox is kind of a type 2.
It's got a fat Debian
It might have a fat Debian kernel at the bottom. So I don't know. It's kind of where do you want to divide that line? Because I'm sure they pull out packages that aren't needed, which then it goes more the appliance route.
But it's still a kernel. When I think about the kernel differentiator in this, right? Because we're talking about like ESXi being a Unix-like. It's the kernel is generationally speaking related to things. And if you're looking at Proxmox, I believe that's Debian.
It is Debian under the hood, at least in terms of the commands you can run.
Right, because you can do an apt-get update, and the thing will do an apt-get update. So that tells me at least that it is it's a type 2. Yeah. Because when I think of a type 1 and we talk bare metal, what we mean is like this is the only thing this can do. You can't go in there and be like, oh, I'm going to install myself Minesweeper and have it work, right? It's not going to do that. It can't do that. It literally cannot do that. But I'm pretty sure with Proxmox, if you wanted to throw a GUI on it, you could probably install KDE.
That's fair.
Maybe. And I don't know.
You can get stuff like that. But those are the difference between your 2 type of hypervisors. So I'm going to go back and forth. But why do you love ESX so much?
This is a complicated answer, and I'll try to simplify it. First off is that it's very close, near dear to my heart because it has been the thing that has helped me elevate my personal career in my life to where it is now. Like I owe a lot of that to home labbing and be able to do that stuff. But it is the thing that's allowed me to, and because you can download ESXi for free.
You do need an account. That catches a lot of people.
Yeah, you have to create an account. You have to create an account.
But you do have to create an account to make sure that
you're a real human. Do you want a Plex server? You have to create an account. Whatever. But you can run it for free and you can play with it at home. You can do these things. You can even productionize it to some degree at home. And I used that as a platform to learn and get better, and then go to my day job and start deploying, implementing it, and it just made me better. And so, I have this real soft spot because. One, it was what I started with and used, and it ended up being the 800-pound gorilla. Lucky me. Sometimes you don't make the right choices, but also because fundamentally speaking, and this is one of those like I'm not wearing my glasses. But I'd be like, well, actually, it's the best hypervisor there is.
Yeah, it's like the competition is catching up rapidly, but it is way ahead and. Part of that I have to do like a little asterisk. I learned also on ESXi, so I didn't have any of that
Welcome to our one-sided conversation.
Yeah, right. So, but like I've played with XCPNG, I've played with Proxmox, and they do things and they do things well.
Yeah.
But they're just not. They're not at the level of VMware, and they don't have the time that VMware themselves have spent putting in UI and UX things to make things that are command lines easy.
Right.
And so like Another big thing that I like about it is that it's all web GUI'd. I don't have to unless I really need logs or something kind of special, I just hit the management port and it's up and it's running. Mm-hmm. Takes a lot of things, and like it supports all sorts of guest operating systems. Do you know what they just deprecated?
What?
XP.
Really?
As of 8, they deprecated XP.
You could still run XP.
You probably could, but they terminated a couple of them that were like short release Linux distros and some special stuff. Okay. But they finally deprecated it where they're like, you can run it, but like, oh, we're not supporting it anymore.
There's not going to be VMware tools. Because speaking of that, just as an add-on, I am a big fan of esoteric operating systems, and I have a perfect example because you and I talked about.
Oh, this is that weird
Haiku.
one.
Haiku. I'm going to talk about Haiku. Let's just move this over.
Can't have
to
a real conversation without talking about Haiku.
Okay.
Can we?
All right. So BOS, how you want to explain it or call it, was a competitive operating system that was supposed to exist to run on the old Mac classics and whatnot of the era when Apple moved on to faster silicon, right?
Yeah.
The company ultimately failed, and it was it just didn't work out. And BIOS, which is really cool, I thought really neat looking, was thrown to the side in favor of NextOS, which we're talking history lesson here, but it's not necessary. But there was there's just like this fundamental love for this operating system, and so it is still in existence, still being updated and created, and it's been ported to x86. And
Ported to x86.
But it is not Linux. Right, because it was on PPC. It was PowerPC stuff.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so it was ported to x86. But it's not Linux. It's not Windows. It's BOS. It's BIOS, right? Mm-hmm. And they just released a new version. I'll promise to stop here. But what I want to get at is that it's an esoteric operating system. It's like 5 dudes in another part of the world who are just like, we love this and we're doing it because it's our hobby. And God bless you guys. Anyway, it runs on VMware ESXi.
Yeah.
I got it running on and it runs great. And I just think that is the coolest thing, that I can take whatever I want and play with it and put it in there. And sure, you're not going to run it in production. I wouldn't trust it past my mouse clicks, but it works, and it works great. And it's reliable.
So what don't you like about VMware and ESXi? Oh. We can slide into vCenter a little bit too, because that's where I know a lot of my gripes come more from the vCenter side, which if you don't know, vCenter is their management appliance. You can install it on the host, and it will collect your host into clusters for you. It'll let you organize them in data centers, stuff like that.
That's how you get your high availability.
What irks you?
VMware has, because they're the 800-pound gorilla, is that their product is really good and it's very expensive. And when it comes down to spreading the value and the word to other home labbers and people like that, I have a hard time selling something to somebody where they're like, well, if I want to run 2 of them, I have to spend $1,000. I don't want to do that. And they're right, because there should be some sort of breakdown of the stuff you get with XCP&G or Proxmox, where you spend, I don't know how much does Proxmox cost? Is $40, $60 to just get a basic license. And
I think it's per server. It's 60 or something, but it's still way less than your VMware and license.
Of course, VMware is, like you said, the market owner at 84%. So they can be like, yeah, no, this is for enterprise. But I think that if you ignore the little people, that big soft gooey area of little people, that you are selling yourself short of the value that you could be providing. So
and I mean, there's ways to get around that. vMug, which we highly recommend you join if you're at all interested. You don't have to pay for anything unless you want the vMug Advantage, which is how we do all of our home labbing, which keeps us sharp for both of our jobs.
Everything.
But that is kind of the holdback, is there's no little guy license. I can't just have 3 ESXi hosts and 1 vCenter or something like that. I mean,
they technically do there's a license called the Essentials license, which gets you 3 hosts.
It's $500 something.
It's $500, and but it's perpetual as of right now.
Okay, that's nice.
But you don't get the cool stuff.
Yeah,
you only get the vCenter management, so you can manage, turn off VMs, and control that kind of stuff, which is a good chunk of it. But you don't get vMotion. You can't move VMs between hosts.
No.
You technically can, but the VMs can't be alive. There's a difference between I shut down this virtual machine and then I moved it over there and turned it on, versus it's alive and it moved.
Yeah, for the last place where Rich and I worked together, Rich had to move them manually, if I remember correctly. They didn't have the budget for the licensing, and so Rich would be like, there's too much resource usage, and he would go in and manually shut down the VM, and then it would move across to the new host, and he have to unregister it from one host and re-register it to the other host. It was quite a process.
Proving my point. Yeah. So, and I mean, I get it. That is their secret sauce, right?
Yeah,
a lot of that stuff is, that's where their benefit to business is, and that's why, if you were serious about learning this stuff, because it's what big enterprises are using, that's where that vMug Advantage comes in. It's $200 a year. It's yearly, and that sucks. But you get all of it, basically.
You get all of it, and you get to interact with people, if you're in the Northwest region, you might interact with Rich and myself. But if you're around, you get to interact with the VMware themselves too, are often at these user groups.
They are very much, and they're very, even though it's not owned and run by VMware, they're very much connected to it, which is awesome because, I mean, you want that. You want those people to be connected to the community because the nerds that are there are your customers, and they're nerds just like you. So whatever. Yeah. Anyway, but I digress.
Honestly, there are two things I'm kind of have an issue with. One, VMware is not open source, which I like.
Does that bother you?
I like to validate my code, or at least have others validate my code for me.
But don't they? I mean, in a sense, aren't you explicitly giving them money a validation of their code?
True. I understand that to a degree, but like I can see it as a downside where hey, if it was open source, everyone can look at it, everyone can poke at it.
Sure.
You get better software that way.
Everyone can compile and run it for free.
Yeah, it's already given for free, so why not open source it, right? It's only requiring a cost.
I mean, there's just.
And then their hardware requirements are kind of aggressive.
Yeah, that's
because you upgraded you had Intel, I think 2680 V4s.
I had 2680 V2s,
and then those have been dead since like beginning of 7.
And when I was running those, I was on ESXi 6.
Yeah. And then you went to 4.
When I went to 7, when I went to ESXi 7, you get the we can't guarantee that these are going to be supported in the next iteration of ESXi. So you may want to consider upgrading your 8-year-old.
Have you tried not being poor?
Yeah, but you have a great point. Like
I get they can only support so much. They are a small team and they have to limit it. But like I think for 8 you have to be at scalables, which is Are you good?
I'm good. I'm the last.
You're the last. You're the last.
I got the same message, so I've been trying to find a way.
I mean, V4s have been around for 7 years, so maybe I really can't complain. But it's hard when you look at things like, standard KVM that'll just run on
a potato.
Yeah,
you
a potato.
You can run it on
a
pie.
If you have a pie. Yeah, but if you have a good enough potato, like a 2680 V2, which is still a good processor, even today's day and age.
I'm not kidding. Yeah.
You could virtualize on it.
Yeah.
And VMware doesn't always allow you to do that, or at least doesn't allow you to do it fully supported.
Right. Yeah, they do that. You can. There's an option you can feed the boot installer.
Ignore.
Yeah, where you can install on anything you want, and your success is going to be a varying degree based on what you're using. Right. If you're like V3 CPUs or V2 CPUs, you're probably going to be totally fine. Matter of fact, we had a guy in our Discord who installed it on, I think it was his V2 CPU, and it worked fine. And that's great. But you start to get older, it'll let you install it, but you're going to have a bad time, basically.
Yeah, and there also, just to point this out, VMware Fling has tons of side projects and stuff. Cool, so a lot of the hottest one has been VMware on ARM, which is their big market sector they're going to try to get into and stuff like that. But the Fling is where they're testing it out with other people. So if you just want to go download it and grab it, you can run ESXi on ARM. Yeah, and I've heard it does pretty well. It's not amazing, going to break records or anything, but it runs.
Does it run only ARM then?
I believe so.
Okay, so it's not doing.
You can't transfer instruction sets. If you are on x86, you're on x86. If you're on ARM, you're on ARM. Like
ultimately, that would be, in my opinion, the hypervisor, and maybe VMware is listening, that would be the best. And this is so complicated. Would be the one that you can.
Hardware instruction set emulation is wild.
Right, but Apple does it. Apple does it on there. So why can't VMware do it?
You also do it on like your if you ever emulated a PlayStation game. That's straight up. But those are intense single core tasks, and you might not get the best benefit out of it.
That's true. So. Yeah, I mean you're right. And there's a difference between I'm doing this for fun on my computer versus I'm running my enterprise on this, and this one ARM app cannot not work. And so I get it. It's
But you talked about being worried about the future of VMware. I'm kind of not worried because it's the 800-pound gorilla who has to deal with the other 800-pound gorillas that don't move very fast with containers and are still running their stuff on old hardware.
Who are you speaking of?
Oh, I mean, things like Dell. Dell has old stuff that is on a VM, and eventually, maybe it can be containerized, maybe it can't.
That's true.
We don't know. I mean, one of the kind of I think it was about 22 days ago, they killed Internet Explorer, and there were lots of enterprises that had I don't know 5-10 years of notice that Internet Explorer was going of the way of the dodo, and they still sat around and did what they could, and there's still this app that runs ActiveX that's sitting and has to have Internet Explorer. So everyone's endpoint teams just turned off that update because you can't have that final update, else it clears out your ActiveX application that happens to run your HR platform or some random critical thing you didn't think was that much of a big deal at the time. Right. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't mean to say that it's going to disappear by any means, because I don't believe that's the case. It's too well used, but the world's evolving, and I'm interested to see how they really grab onto containers, because containerization is, I mean, it's just the way everybody's going, because it's like taking, so we should probably say, because there's probably some people watching this who don't know what we're talking about or listening, and that is, we at this point, I'm sure you understand what virtualization is, which is you have an operating system that would be running on a one-to-one relationship between physical hardware and an operating system. Virtualization would turn that physical operating system into a virtual machine that you can have multiple running side by side, and the hypervisor is running it. So you virtualize the operating system. And so if you're running applications and programs and whatnot, you can be doing inside of that virtual machine, and it thinks it is talking to real hardware.
Yeah.
But in essence, it's running. There's a layer of a translation and interaction between it, and then there's the hypervisor, which is running all those VMs. Containerization is like the Leonardo DiCaprio, let's go deeper, where instead of virtualizing the operating system, you just virtualize segment, and is virtualize the right term? I say virtualize, but
it's closer. It's virtualizing an app is how I like to think about it.
So it's application virtualization.
Each of your applications gets to talk to the kernel version you want. It's going to just get its instruction sets from there. There's no dependency, what they call dependency hell in Linux world.
Right.
Don't have to worry about that because you built the container image that knows everything about that, and it keeps all of these containers separate so that if I want to update, let's say my one of my applications needs Python 3.6, but all my other ones need 3.4. Well, I can just update that one to 3.6 and leave the rest on 3.0 and not think about it and have it shatter my entire production server.
Right.
And not everything. There's lots of people who will run around the internet and tell you containers are the best thing for everything. They're getting there, but we're not there yet. There are things like an Active Directory. Those are not going to be containerized. Yeah, not all applications are going to benefit. SQL at large workloads, not going to be containerized.
Right. You want dedicated workload or dedicated infrastructure for that.
Yeah, and so they're definitely the way of the future, but they also have their purpose and their place.
Yeah, the benefit of it over virtualization is that every time you virtualize an operating system, you have a redundant duplicitous operating system with all the same amount of memory usage and hard disk usage and all that kind of stuff. Because if you had examples, let's say you had 4 Windows Server VMs, right? And they're all doing different things, but they're all the same kernel. You have 4 separate installations of Windows Server, and they're all using up resources, right?
Yeah.
In containerization, the promise is that you only need 1 Windows Server, for example, and you could have numerous applications, but you have to worry about them interacting with each other in a negative fashion.
Yeah.
And so you cut down the amount of excess space, which sounds great, but it doesn't, like Brandon's saying, like it's when you have to use these big fat honking systems like Microsoft SQL or I still believe, and I will die on that hill until things change, that you should not run Plex in container. Do you run Plex in container?
I do. It's great.
See, we're different. But like things that have huge honking like potential workloads, I still think very much should stay in a virtual machine purely.
Yeah, that's fair. And one of the funny things, and I think when it was not in ESXi 8, but ESXi 7, Rich and I installed Tanzu, and we set up Tanzu. And it was just Linux VMs that were running containers.
Yeah, that was.
And we were a little let down because we were virtualizing the VM layer on top of the container layer. Now in 8, that's all changed, and it's actually directly talking to another kernel, which I'm sure is that extra 300 megs it added.
Yeah, I think it's.
It was just kind of sitting there like, it's all just Linux VMs in the end, so nothing really changed.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, and the thing is though, for VMware's, their product is virtualization. So when it comes to containerization, they're trying to find a way how they can probably merge these two worlds together to create a homogeneous like enterprise platform.
And I mean, it's crazy when you look at Proxmox and you can just spin up a container on your metal, and grant you that's a type 2 hypervisor which talked about. Yeah, but like it's really more powerful when you're directly talking to the container than talking through extra layers of a VM. So it definitely kept VMware on their toes, because if they weren't paying attention, if they weren't making things like Tanzu, this would have caught up to them, and they would have fell flat-footed.
And I think that I'm probably wrong, and somebody from VMware, if they ever watch this, will correct me. But I'm pretty sure that Tanzu was a company that they bought. It wasn't called Tanzu. I can't remember who it was, but because that was outside of their wheelhouse. And the smart thing you do when you're a big business and you have lots of money is to go buy somebody who knows what they're doing, and then get that into your kernel and your system. So,
fair. But if you don't want to be like Rich and manually move VMs around, well, how do I manage all these servers?
And you have money.
You do need some money. You do need a pretty penny.
You do need some. Branden mentioned, I mean, you need the magic in virtualization for the enterprise, and not for somebody running a single home lab box at home with as many machines as they can fit into their hardware.
Yeah.
Is to get vCenter, which is, like Branden says, the management interface for controlling your hypervisors, your hosts, and all your virtual machines, and your storage, and doing all those magical things. And that's how you do it.
So yeah, I suggest if you're interested, get the vMug Advantage, try it out in your home lab. It'll make your day when you can just migrate your VMs off of one host onto another host.
Yeah, for sure.
Patch it, put it back in, and then do the other one. And it just makes life so much easier. You don't have to hear about, Plex is down, because Plex doesn't go down. It just moves over to the VM. I mean, especially in a streaming application, you would never even notice that it vMotioned around.
Yeah. Do you know how it works?
No, I don't. So what we're talking about when we talk about vMotioning is what is called DRS, which is a distributed resource schedule.
Yeah.
And that chooses what physical box you're going to run your VM on.
Yeah.
But so how does the magic happen?
Well, how
did it happen? I don't know if it happens the same at 8 now.
One of the fascinating things that really just blew me away with, how does a system move a living, running operating system from one machine to another with nary a minuscule interruption? Mm-hmm. And when I say minuscule interruption, I mean literally like minuscule. And I'm going to do a bad job of describing this. But so because the hypervisor controls everything and it's running the virtual machine, you have all these CPUs and resources. All it has to do is, first thing it does is it creates a snapshot of the storage. And what that does is it creates a delta so that it makes the disk that exists there read-only. Mm-hmm. And then all the writes are happening in a delta file. And it copies that file over to the other side, right? Mm-hmm. So that it's if it's host to host, it copies that host. If it's centralized storage, it doesn't need to do that. But it then begins the process of slowing the virtual machine down. And how it does that is by starving it of CPU resources. And it does this in a way that the virtual machine essentially just grows slow. And at that instant when it reaches that wait period, that's when it pops up on the other side, and the RAM state all the RAM has been copied over. The storage, if there's storage copied over, and it just flicks a switch, and it instantaneously kills the first, and the other one's already, because it has all the state, it just immediately starts it back up. And I remember when I was in this training for it in the school, and we were doing tests. We would run ping tests on a machine, and we would watch it. And we would ping from like a local desktop to a virtual machine, and it'd be ping, 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 ping. One ping would stop, and then ping, ping, ping would start again. And that only that drop, that one minuscule drop, was just because at that point it was literally turning on the other side, and the virtual machine has no concept. Anything happened, because it just all it does from a real life sense is it just starves the computer of like brain power until it just waits, and then it goes, there it is, and it got the information, and it's like calls into question what reality is.
It's wild. I mean, especially when you think about these are just files.
They're
just moving files around.
Great point. That's another thing that you learn early on in virtualization, is that what is a virtual machine? A virtual machine is just files, flat files in an operating system. That's all it is.
Now, in order to do what Rich talked about, you do need shared storage. So you need somewhere to have all your shared resources for where your VMDKs go, your VMX files, all the stuff that tells VM how to boot. And then on top of the DRS you get HA functionalities. And that's really helpful, because if you have shared storage and you have two hosts, and say one of my hosts just gives me a CPU fault, crashes hard, well, it's just going to go reboot them all in the next host. And there is some downtime for that. It's not pretty, but it's better than, have a downed host with VMs that you can't access on it, and you're SOL in that aspect.
Yeah, that's people confuse high availability and fault tolerance.
Yeah,
as what they actually mean. And all high availability technically means is that something will be highly available. If it disappears, it will, as quickly as possible, be fired up somewhere else and be available. Fault tolerance is I can tolerate losing everything.
And that's another thing. You can get fault tolerance in vCenter.
Yeah,
you need to have
weirdness though. That's
you need to have some hardware for it.
You
need to have extra hardware and stuff like that. But from my understanding, and you'll have to correct me here, when it's fault tolerant, it is making an active copy like every second. It is sending an updated copy so that the minute copy 1 dies, copy 2 is back up without even a reboot.
The way I understand it, and I can't wait for the audience to correct me here, is that when you run in fault tolerant mode, your VM is restricted to a specific amount of CPUs, a specific amount of RAM. It's very, very limited because it's literally...
Can't do any GPUs.
Right. It's literally running that VM in synchronicity between 2 hosts at one time.
Okay.
So the states are identical. That machine is, for all intents and purposes, running in 2 separate locations in lockstep because the hosts are keeping the information that the CPU... that's just crazy thoughts, right? And it used to be very limited. Like you could only have 1 virtual CPU, and I know they made it bigger now. But that's for oh my gosh, if this computer crashes, then that human being dies, kind of stuff. And
I think that's why the couple places I worked have never used that feature because of how limiting it was.
Right.
And I think now that it's higher and you can actually get 8 CPUs and actually a decent amount of RAM.
Yeah.
If you only had 1 CPU. I don't know a single critical application at an enterprise that is running on 1 CPU. And so...
I agree, not to mention the fact that I think the big limitation probably has always been how fast is your network?
Yeah, do you have the
because you have to be able to transfer states. I think it's...
That's a good point. That's another requirement for DRS is you can do it over gigabit networks. It can be done, but you really, really... I guess... You really want 10G, but now you have 2.5 and 5, so you could probably get away with that if you can find. Are there switches that support it? I haven't found.
You have to
I've
buy
seen
a
three.
multi-gig switch. The elusive Cisco multi-gig switches, which are more expensive than small cars. And and out of the switch, maybe 5 of the ports will be multi-gig, and the rest will be 1 gig.
Or they told me hey, all of our computers now have 2.5 gigabit. But I have yet to see some decent switches that have 2.5 gig out.
Well, we should, without going off on a tangent here, I just want to say that I don't know what's going on, but why can't we just move to 10 and get over with it? Why do we have to go to 2.5 and 5?
I don't know, man.
When we can't buy those switches ourselves because a normal mortal can't afford that.
That's fair.
So let's just get 10, and let's just get all the 10 stuff, make them all SFP+, use transceivers so you can get your multi-gig step downs or whatever you need and go to Ethernet. But yeah, dude, it's my first ESXi cluster that I built was on 1 gig, but it was a 4x1 gig because that's what the storage handled. And it did, I did basically a round robin where it's send some here, send some there, send some there, send some over here, and then start back over there. Right?
Good old multipathing.
Multipath, that's what we call it. Yeah. So what are you using? Let's take this back around. Tell me what you are either personally or professionally. It's up to you. What you're using your VMware virtualization for. How does it relate to you personally as something that you'd be using in your home lab or your job?
So my biggest use is Nextcloud.
Okay.
That's where I keep my virtualization, and then I pass it through my DMZ out to the internet. But it's big feature for me. And what kind of blew my mind when I was working help desk was snapshots. Nextcloud upgrades maybe weren't the smoothest in the past. They are leagues above where they used to be.
So much better now.
But they weren't the smooth in the past because you had database corruption, you had versions of PHP to match, you had to make sure that your Apache mods knew about the new PHP.
Oh my gosh.
Dude, which a lot of that's been ironed out, right?
Nightmare memories.
But that was a big thing. And so I can say update it. I actually have a workflow through Ansible that tells and goes to my vCenter. It tells it to make a snapshot. It then goes and patches Ubuntu and then runs through the updater, grabs the new zip and all that. And then I can actually tell it if it worked or not, because my playbook doesn't know quite yet if it was a successful application deployment or not. But that's the biggest thing. And I do some things like that where I have AWX, which is the open source version of Ansible Tower. It allows you to have kind of a GUI to all your Ansible playbooks.
You should show me that sometime. I'd love to see that.
It's really cool. It's of course, it's Kubernetes under it, but it's a really nice way to like hook into all your servers. You can SSH, stuff like that. Maybe we'll do a whole episode on that.
Yeah, that might not be a bad idea. You'll be driving that conversation.
Yeah, right?
For sure.
But I use it for that. I run a Plex server as well for stuff like that. And then I'm trying to think, do I have anything else? Oh, I set up Stable Diffusion the other day. Actually did a GPU pass-through.
Really?
Yeah. I used
it to your virtual machine?
Yeah.
Nice.
On a virtual machine. And there's a Python script for it. You can just runs it, and it runs the 1.4 checkpoint, which is not as great or as cool. I'm trying to get the 2.1 working.
Is that stuff all behind like a paywall or something?
No, it's a completely free GitHub project.
Oh, nice.
And I just plugged in my old 1070 and passed it through. Works.
Yeah,
works really nice.
That's awesome.
Some limitations too for snapshotting around GPUs and stuff like that, which you should be aware of if you're using ESXi. Right. But either way, that's my main thing. Just kind of wanted to play with it and give another use to it.
That's cool. I didn't know you were doing that. That's another great use of like virtualization, right? Is spin up a VM, put all that stuff in there, and then toss it when you're done. Right? That's the benefit of for anybody's home lab, is you can do that pretty quickly. And
then Dockers. The other
sure.
thing I've been working on setting up is either a Docker Swarm or K3s cluster, so you can kind of move your containers around, do stuff like that. But VMs let you do that, where you can set stuff up, you can take a snapshot, you can see if the container actually moved properly, and stuff like that. Or a lot of the features I like to use it for is you have your Swarm set up, but you maybe don't have the finances for 3 hosts to be running them all, so you run it on 2, and you have 3 VMs that are constantly up and on different nodes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, can you, like, speaking of that, when you do that, because I know I believe, you correct me if I'm wrong, you need to have 3 nodes for a swarm, right? There's a quorum or something like that. I
believe, for Swarm and for K3s. I know for K3s 100%, you at least need to have 3 for sure. They probably want you to have more like 5 or 6.
Sure.
Because you're supposed to have a management plane and a workload plane, I guess. I forget what you call it. But either way. But it's those type of things where like, it can give you that extra set of redundancy through, virtualization on ESXi.
Let's go deeper.
And back to snapshots, we should talk about patching in ESXi.
Yeah, well, there's been all the discussion, especially in the news, about like vulnerabilities in ESXi, specifically ransomware vulnerabilities, which are a big deal. I mean, ransomware is a big deal. As long as the bad guys can extort money out of you, they're going to do it.
I learned this. They have a help desk at the ransomware place that you call them.
Really?
And you get some dude who's just like, ransomware is a service out there. But the big one we're talking about right now is called ESXargs, and it's affecting 6.5 and 6.7, and it's specifically affecting hosts that had their management planes exposed to the internet.
Yeah.
Which every bone in my body just hated saying that.
Well, it's for people who may not know, so in VMware or in ESXi, and I imagine all other hypervisors that are like bare metal, you've got a management interface, which is like, it's your management interface. It's like your lights out or your out of band management. It's the interface that is dedicated to just managing the virtual host. It's not for virtual machine traffic, it's not anything like that. And then you've got your virtual network interface, or where you've got your virtual switches, or however your hypervisor manages those virtual interfaces. That's the interface that goes out to the for VM traffic. Now they can be the same interface. They can absolutely be the same interface
against VMware's wishes.
Right. Yeah. Or the right way to do it is to have a virtual your management interface is on a specific network interface that is on your management network. If you are putting together a like bespoke VLAN out home lab, you should absolutely have a management VLAN. That's where all your management interfaces are, and you have controls around accessing from where and what subnets you can get to it. Right, that makes sense. The situation you're talking about with the ESXargs is those people took those network interfaces that were their management interfaces and put them on the internets, or put them on unsecured public networks that were accessible to others in ways that they were unprotected. And that's how they are having a bad time.
Yeah.
Right.
And then they got popped.
Yeah. And not to mention that Branden kind of mentioned, it's like, we're talking about 6, what'd you say? 6.1 and 6.5?
No, 6.5 and 6.7.
So 6.5 and 6.7.
As of last year, they're out of support. Like even VMware is kind of starting to, I think you can get P2, P1, P2, P3 support, but they're not going to do P1.
Pay support.
Yeah, I'll pay support stuff if you're a real company, because if If you haven't noticed, Rich, the enterprise doesn't move super fast.
I don't know.
I don't know
mean,
if you know.
It depends. We talked about this off camera a little bit, but it still confuses me and kind of stuns me. Like if you run a business and you're using ESXi as your platform, right? If you're using virtualization as a platform, and it's a real business and it's not a home lab, but even if it's a home lab, like you should try to at least stay current enough to get your patching. Like if you make money off this, you should be patching it.
But for lots of places, it's only current enough to get support.
Sure, but
I agree with you.
It's fair. So
I'd love to live in that world, but like we just don't live in that world where things are patched regularly.
But VMware patched these vulnerabilities a long time ago. Like they're 2-year-old bugs.
Yeah.
It's just
and they even put out a new patch to fix the ARGs.
Oh my goodness.
ARGs already, so that if you were still on 6.5, 6.7, you could update.
Good guy VMware right there. That's what that is.
And vCenter, did we already talk about it? We'll have to check if I mentioned it before or not, but we have a way to patch ESXi hosts from the CLI in a video. But vCenter, going back to the original topic, will let you do this via GUI. It'll do compliance checks. It'll do lots of hardware compatibility checks and just things that make your life as an admin easier.
Yeah, including rolling upgrades. I upgraded from 7 to 8 through vCenter, and it was probably the most painless experience that I'd had, because before that I would go to the host and I'd boot off of the upgrade media and I'd upgrade the host and that'd be fine. It would do it. I know. But
you did it the hard way.
I did it the hard way. And you know, with if you're running vCenter, it's like, okay, here's the image, the ISO image, deploy, and it just goes boop, and it did it, and it was fine.
Well, and one of the cool things, the place I work, we use auto deploy. Auto deploy is how you pixie boot your VMware servers.
You pixie boot your VMware servers?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's awesome. It works really well. It's no longer maybe VMware's favorite way. It's still supported, still can do it, but they'd rather you have boot media.
You were the first human being
really
that
we have Cisco UCSs and we pixie boot them, and they're really nice.
So again, for people who don't know what we're talking about, so you can boot an entire operating system on a piece of hardware, and it just pulls the over the network using what's called PXE or PXE, pre-execution
environment. Yeah,
but said PXE. It'll pull down the image and it will launch the image and run. And then if you're using PXE boot in VMware, it will then pull the config for the host and bring the host up as configured. And
it's nice because I just tell it, hey, here's your new 7.0 image.
Isn't it slower for you to?
No, it's much quicker. It doesn't have to do all the writes to the disk. But it also is, VMware has stated they would rather you have a RAID 1 boot media to kind of do their things and have what is called a stateful config. But there's lots of places, especially, government-wise, where they don't want any actual saved configs on their servers. And so
that's fair.
They'll boot from a secure SAN, and that's how they'll do their whole thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've just never, I learned about doing that stuff when I was taking my trainings, but I never saw it deployed.
It's not painless. But there's a reason that
as a man who's like wiping tears.
Yeah,
it's not painless.
It has its quirks, but like there's something really nice about it. About you just change a couple what they call deployment rules, and you reboot it, and it just comes up, and it's kind of
that's
nice.
Interesting.
So,
guess you don't have to worry about your boot media failing either in that case.
Yeah,
because it's just so another thing about we didn't talk about this all, but like the reason that VMware, one of the things that VMware does is really impressive, and there's a lot of there's other systems that do this too, is that VMware, when it boots up, or ESXi when it boots up, it doesn't matter if it's pulling from a local hard drive or like Brandon's talking about his PXE booting, his auto deploy, it loads the entire operating system into memory, and then it never touches the disks again. The only thing that's on the disk that is actually is written to is the config file that defines how that host is configured.
And I think some of that was changed in 7 and 8 because they want you to use media that has controllers, because we used to be able, back in the good old days, if you will, run 6.7 on a USB drive. You just plug that sucker in, but they don't recommend that anymore at all.
It was deprecated in 7, and in 8 they're like, no.
just don't.
because that's also what they're doing, the Kubernetes stuff now too.
Yeah.
So you need this more persistent storage space, and because they want to write logs.
Yeah.
And by default, if you were in the older version of VMware and you booted off ESXi, you didn't get persistent logs.
No.
You had to
syslog server.
Yeah.
Or
point them at a persistent storage. So
point them back to your vCenter or something.
Yeah. Or vSAN, or SAN. Like that's what we used to just point back at the SAN. Like this. There's a data set.
Put your logs here.
Data store just for logs. I guess the last question I'll ask you, then we can kind of bring this to a close. Is obviously you like it. Would you recommend VMware to somebody who's getting into home lab, or what would your approach be? What would be the thing that you would start with? Like, let's say they're like interested in virtualization. Do you say launch Microsoft Hyper-V, or how about even the simplest saying VirtualBox? Get yourself some VirtualBox. Yeah, what do you think?
I think I'd actually have to ask them, like, what do they want a home lab for? Because I go back and forth, just thinking about re-architecting about how much longer do I need VMware if I'm going to Kubernetes and Docker all the things. Right. At a certain point, it's going to probably just make more sense for me to run, just a plain old Docker bare metal. I'd have to ask them if they know they just want to set up some game servers and things like that. Well, then just here's some Docker and Portainer, and Portainer makes it so easy just to run containers and stuff like that.
For sure.
But if you want to do things the way enterprises are doing it, if you want to do it that professional way, if you want to run things like Nextcloud has a container, I've heard it works really well, but the official documentation recommends you run it in its own Linux VM. Yeah. And that's, a great part of virtualization is now my Nextcloud is technically HA. If it fails over, it'll come back up on the other host, and
you lose the server, you lose your
I think I'd have to ask them how deep do they want to go down the rabbit hole, right?
Yeah, that's fair. I think fundamentally it comes down to what are your objectives? Do you want to use this as something that's going to help you professionally too? Because that's another part of it, right?
Because do it. The recruiter bots, they look.
Virtualization's not going away, and so I love the idea of being able to pack as much density into the hardware. That was the thing that made me fall in love with virtualization as a concept. Was you could put so much density. We used to be a long time ago, back in my day, the operating systems waited on the hardware. The OSs they needed faster hardware than physically existed. So if you're running Windows 95, 98, that era, the OSs were waiting for the CPUs to keep up, right?
Yeah.
And then hardware exploded, and hardware got fast as hell, and the OSs were like, I have everything I need. I'm this slow because this is how I work.
The top.
Right.
Yeah, and I think you especially you got to watch rooms of data centers go down to 2 or 3 racks.
Yeah, shrink. And it was a big change. That's
and
for sure.
Now, I've never worked in a place that doesn't run virtualized stuff everywhere. It's usually VMware, but I follow r/sysadmin. It's all virtualization underneath. There's very few applications, SQL being one of them, that usually have a bare metal component to them still. But that may be changing with Kubernetes and Docker, who knows?
Yeah, well, all the hyperscalers, all the people who the Azures and the AWSs, they're all virtualized.
Yeah.
I mean, they're using different...
They're virtualized on some Linux flavor, but...
Yeah, they have... I'm not specifically saying they're using VMware specifically, but they're using virtualization to run those customer workloads, because that is the way that you create these really great boundaries and segmentations and are able to track and control what, access between these different VMs is.
Who has access and who's paying for what access.
Exactly. How do we charge you? Anyway, I think that's going to do it for this one, Branden. Yeah. This has been enlightening. I hope you guys enjoyed I'm just talking about ESXi and literally the best hypervisor on the planet.
Yeah. And if you like this,
sponsor me.
And if you like this and you want us to keep making more content, press I thought it'd be better. I think it's down here now. The subscribe button to support me, myself, and Rich and John here. Yep. And then if you want a super cool hoodie or a hat or shirt, check out our merch store below as well.
Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. We will see you again soon.